Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some strange or quite unusual poetry, because that's always fun to talk about. And I have a bit of a doozy to talk about today, both going weird and also around the weird, talking about different cultures and whatnot. I am referring to The Colors of the Comanche Nation Flag by Hoahwah. For those who don't know, Hoahwah is a Comanche Southern Arapaho writer, having written mainly poetry, and it seems to be nothing else beyond that. He has an MFA, and I think he's done some teaching here and there, and he's received the National Endowment for the Arts. But I don't know much else about him beyond that, other than the fact that he seems to write quite a bit about Indigenous Americans and especially the Comanche Nation, which he belongs to. Although whereas other Native Indigenous Americans and Indigenous groups and Indigenous poets have written with a spark of optimism or worldliness, it seems that writes with a bit of violence at times, and I'll talk about that when I go into the analysis section. But without further ado, let's talk about the colors of the Comanche Nation flag. I will read it, do a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. Colors of the Comanche Nation flag. Red. Moopit's breath in moonlight outside a child's bedroom window. Hunter's bones scattered on the prairie. Fragrance of Comanche gangstas who entered the zoo club and assassinated the bosses of Underworld 7, a Navajo crime syndicate. Little Stony Burgess's footprints after catching ghost sickness by running through Post Oak Cemetery chased by snot-nosed bully Blender Plenty Bear. Blue. Lips of the poisoned tribal chairman collapsed on the buffet table at the 1974 Comanche Nation inaugural dinner. Silver handkerchief drawn over the stuffed owl used to converse with the dead. In the woods, it's the laughter of Deer Woman as she stomps her male victim to death. Electric guitar distortion of the Messiah playing Jimi Hendrix's Machine Gun as she strolls into the Indian bar. Yellow. Coyote's eyes in the darkness of the back seat at midnight as you speed down Mount Scott on a dare with the headlights off. Crushed buffalo kidney stones used in graffiti to magically imprison the river witch underneath the I-44 bridge. Intricate beadwork on Lucifer's cane left at the funnel cake stand at Comanche Fair. Flashing ignition light to the engines of the Great Abyss. And so that was Colors of the Comanche Nation Flag by Hoahwah, which is just describing the colors of the flag and what they seem to represent to the narrator. A bit of an unusual poem in that I haven't really encountered it before. I've encountered poems that are kind of broken down in topics or separated into sort of categories, different sections, but nothing like this where it's like separated into different colors and what those colors seem to represent, because he breaks it down by the color red and what that seems to indicate. Like Moopit, he talks about Moopit, which is a sort of like bear-like mythical creature in Comanche folklore. Hunter's bones, which is another indigenous kind of figure that you see in folklore. Little Stony Burgess, I don't know who that is. I looked up a lot of the people who are mentioned in this poem, and they either don't exist or they're so only well known in Comanche or indigenous circles that it's not I'm not even easily able to find out who these people are, but they do seem to be important within Comanche culture. And then he goes on to talk about blue, the lips of the poisoned tribal chairman at the Comanche Nation inaugural dinner, the laughter of Deer Woman, which is not the first time I've encountered that folklore figure. I read The Only Good Indian by Stephen Graham Jones, a wonderful book, even if it does fall apart at times. But I really enjoyed, I really enjoyed it, but also it talks about Deer Woman. Like, she's a central character in that story. And the laughter of Deer Woman as she's stomping her male victim to death, that's something that's talked about in that book. So seems to be like an important aspect of Comanche culture. And then he also refers to the Messiah, who might be a musician of sorts, although I'm not really sure who that is. And then he moves on to yellow, where he talks about coyote as you do something dangerous. I really like that particular verse in this poem, where he says, "Coyote's eyes in the darkness of the back seat at midnight as you drive down Mount Scott on a dare with the headlights off." So doing something dangerous. Like, I think coyote is frequently associated with death, or people who are nearing death, and so doing something that dangerous is pretty much enticing coyote to come grab you and watch as you end your own life, which is unfortunate. Then he also talks about like the river witch, which might be some aspect of Comanche culture. I'm not really clear. The beadwork on Lucifer's cane. I don't know what the significance of Lucifer is in indigenous cultures, especially because Lucifer is a Christian figure, and unless there's some blend of Christian folklore and native folklore that I don't know about, it's just a bit confusing to me. And then he says the last part of this poem, flashing ignition light to the engines of the great abyss, as if suggesting that there's something sort of dark and mysterious in nature. But overall, what you get from this entire poem is a summation of at least what Hoahwah thinks is important in Comanche culture. It especially seems pretty violent and deadly. Like the Moopit is hanging outside a child's window. Seems kind of scary. Like the Comanche gangsters who enter the zoo club. I don't know what the zoo club is, but it sounds like a dangerous place to be. And they're assassinating people. Like, you see Deer Woman as she stomps a male victim to death. And you have coyote's eyes in the back seat watching you as you do something dangerous. Like, Comanche culture, Comanche folklore seems to be filled with death and suffering. And I want to compare this with poems from Joy Harjo, which I've talked about before, where she expresses a sort of worldliness, a connectedness with nature. So very peaceful poems, although touching upon hardship and tragedy in the process. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I do like Joy Harjo's poems, but Hoahwah, like, his poems speak to me as well. And I think that it shows the differences in culture there. Like, maybe to Joy, like, connectedness with the earth is important, but maybe to the Comanches who had to deal with the United States and with the settlers who were traveling west and the violence that ensued as a part of that, like, maybe that's ingrained in their culture at this point. That in addition to the sort of like maybe wars that they fought prior to European contact, and the wars that they fought during European contact, like, you have this aspect of sort of violence within a culture. Or maybe this is just an aspect of Comanche culture that I'm not well aware of. Like, this isn't violence so much, but it's a celebration of the heritage of the culture, which seems violent to an outsider like me, but to someone who's within the culture, they see something clearly different. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Colors of the Comanche Nation Flag by Hoahwah. I definitely recommend that you seek this poem out, possibly more than the other poems that I've talked about on this channel. One, because Hoahwah's other poems are just awesome. The way he describes things and the imagery he uses, like as you saw in this poem, and the sort of violent, like, take no prisoners kind of aspect to it. Like, he's not writing for your sake. It's clear that he's writing for himself. And in the process, we're all taken along for a fun ride. So I'm going to link to this poem in the comments, but also look out for some of his other poetry, as I definitely want to look up more in the future. If you have anything to say about his poems, or you want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about Hoahwah and his poems. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this channel and this poem and Poetry Thursday and all that kind of fun stuff, so that we can keep the discussion going there. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Comanche flag travels. Farewell.